On his 18th birthday, a boy who had spent the last decade in the system was given his walking papers and a single folded document. What he discovered wasn't just a place to live. It was a secret buried under tons of earth and rock, a secret that would force him to redefine the very meaning of home and inheritance. If you've ever felt like you were starting from zero, with nothing but the clothes on your back and a story nobody wanted to hear, then this one is for you. Hit that subscribe button, because this is a place where we talk about building a new life from the rubble of the old one. The air on October 5th had a special kind of cold to it, the kind that doesn't just bite your skin, but seeps right into your bones. It was the same cold as the day they came and got me 10 years earlier. Institutional cold. I stood on the cracked pavement in front of Elmwood Residential Center, the place that had been my home, my holding cell, for 2,922 days. I knew the number because I'd counted, every single one. Mrs. Gable, my case manager for the final 2 years, stood beside me, her expression a careful mixture of professional sympathy and bureaucratic relief. She was done with me. My file was closed. She handed me a thin manila envelope. Inside was my birth certificate, my Social Security card, and $300 in cash, the state's parting gift. "That's it, Leo," she said, her voice too bright. "You're officially an adult. The world's your oyster." The world felt less like an oyster and more like a vast, empty parking lot. I had no family to call, no friends on the outside. The boys I'd grown up with at Elmwood were scattered, each cast out on their own 18th birthday into the same indifferent wind. "There's one more thing," she said, pulling a different envelope from her briefcase. It was crisp, white, and looked ancient, like it had been waiting in a file cabinet since before I was born. My name was typed on the front, along with an address for a law firm in a town I'd never heard of. Northwood, a place that sounded more like a direction than a destination. "This came for you about a week ago. We're required to give it to you upon your release." She handed it over. It felt heavier than it should have. I looked at her, a question in my eyes. She just shrugged, a gesture that said her obligation was fulfilled. "Good luck, Leo." Then she turned, walked back through the heavy steel doors, and they clicked shut behind her, a sound I knew better than my own heartbeat. I stood there for a long time, just holding the 2 envelopes. One was my past, a collection of state-issued documents that proved I existed. The other was a question mark. I had a bus pass that was good for one cross-state trip, and a vague plan to head to the city, find a dishwashing job, and rent a room somewhere cheap and probably miserable. That was the extent of my ambition. Survival. I tucked the state envelope into the pocket of my jacket and looked at the one from the law firm. I almost threw it away. What could a lawyer possibly want with me? I was a ward of the state, with a net worth of $300 and a worn-out pair of boots. It was probably a bill, some forgotten medical expense from my childhood that the state was now happily passing on to me. But curiosity is a stubborn thing. I walked to the bus station, a mile down the road, the cold air hollowing out my lungs. I sat on a hard plastic bench under the flickering fluorescent lights and carefully tore open the lawyer's envelope. The letterhead was embossed, fancy. Davies and Dunn, attorneys at law. The text was dense, full of words I didn't understand. Legalese. But I caught the important phrases. Last will and testament. Arthur Vance. My grandfather. I hadn't heard his name in a decade. He was my mother's father, a quiet, gruff man I only vaguely remembered from before the accident that took my parents. I thought he was long dead. The letter said that upon my 18th birthday, I was to inherit the entirety of his remaining estate. My heart did a stupid little flip. Estate. That sounded grand. I pictured a house, a car, maybe a savings account. For a second, I let myself dream. The dream lasted until the next paragraph. The estate consisted of a single parcel of land, 1.7 acres in rural Northwood County. The letter went on to specify, in brutally clear terms, that the property contained a single dilapidated structure of no discernible monetary value. It was, the lawyer wrote, a collapsed root cellar. There was more. My grandfather had passed away 2 years ago. His property had been tied up in probate, and there was an outstanding tax lien. A developer, a company called Mountain Ridge Holdings, had already made a formal offer to the county to buy the land to settle the debt. The offer was for $50,000. But the will was clear. I, as the sole heir, had the first right of refusal. I could either allow the sale, in which case the law firm would take their fees and the state would take its cut for my upkeep, leaving me with maybe $15,000. Or I could claim the property myself. To do so, I had to appear in person at their office and pay the outstanding property tax lien in full. The amount was $9.41. $9. It was a joke, a cruel, cosmic joke. They'd give me 15 grand if I did nothing, or I could have a collapsed hole in the ground for the price of a cheap lunch. It was a test, but I couldn't figure out what it was testing. Mr. Davies, the lawyer, had included his phone number. I walked over to the payphone, the receiver cold and greasy in my hand, and fed it a pocketful of change. He answered on the second ring, his voice dry as dust. Davies? Hello. My name is Leo. You sent me a letter about Arthur Vance's property? There was a pause, the rustle of papers. Ah, yes, Mr. Vance. Congratulations on your birthday. Have you had a chance to review the offer from Mountain Ridge? I have, I said. I don't understand. Why is it only $9 for me to claim it? Your grandfather was a peculiar man, Davies said, and I could almost hear the sigh in his voice. He paid his taxes religiously for 30 years, but in the last year of his life he stopped. The $9 amount is the total of the final year's delinquent tax plus penalties. He structured his will so that the only thing required to claim the land was to settle that debt. It's an unusual but legally sound provision. And this collapsed root cellar, is that all that's there? To my knowledge, yes. Our satellite survey shows a wooded parcel and a topographical anomaly consistent with a caved-in subterranean structure. The county assessor valued the structure itself at 0. The value is in the land, Mr. Vance. $50,000 is a very generous offer for an undeveloped, unserviced lot. My advice, as the executor of the estate, is to take the deal. $15,000 would be a fine start for a young man in your position. A fine start. It was more money than I'd ever seen. I could get an apartment, buy some decent clothes, maybe even take a course at a community college. It was the smart choice, the logical choice. But something held me back. My grandfather. I remembered his hands, calloused and strong. I remembered the smell of sawdust in his workshop. He wasn't a man who did things without a reason. Peculiar, the lawyer had called him. Why would he leave me a puzzle instead of a gift? Why a collapsed hole in the ground? I need to see it, I said, the words surprising me as they came out. See it? Davies sounded annoyed. I can assure you there is nothing to see. It's a hole in the woods. I'm still coming, I said. I have a bus pass. I'll be there in 2 days. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Very well," he finally said, his tone dripping with disapproval. "Our office is on the main square in Northwood. Don't be late. Mountain Ridge is eager to close." I hung up the phone, my hand trembling slightly. I had $300 to my name. I was about to spend 2 days on a bus to go look at a hole in the ground in a town I'd never heard of, all because of a dead man's peculiar last wish. It was the stupidest decision I could possibly make, and it was the first decision in a long, long time that felt entirely my own. I walked over to the ticket counter, the lawyer's letter clutched in my hand like a map. "1 ticket to Northwood," I said. The man behind the counter didn't even blink. He just printed the ticket and pushed it under the glass. My grand inheritance wasn't a house or a bank account. It was a bus ticket to the middle of nowhere. The journey was a slow bleed of miles. The bus hummed and rattled its way out of the city's gray orbit, through sprawling suburbs and into the browning farmland of the state's interior. For 2 days, I watched the world through a dirty window. I watched families in cars, laughing. I watched truckers at rest stops, drinking coffee and talking on their phones. I watched the whole world move with a purpose I couldn't comprehend. I was a ghost at the feast, a passenger in my own life, heading toward a destination that was likely just another dead end. I slept with my head against the vibrating glass, my jacket pulled up to my chin, the $9 I'd set aside for my grandfather's debt tucked safely in my shoe. I tried to remember him, to pull a clear image from the fog of my childhood. I remembered a tall, quiet man who smelled of soil and pipe tobacco. He lived alone in a small house that felt like it was more workshop than home. He never said much. My mother would talk for both of them, her bright, rapid-fire chatter filling the silences he left. He would just watch me, his eyes a pale, faded blue, a little sad around the edges. He taught me how to tie a figure-8 knot once. He held my small hands in his big, rough ones and guided them through the motions, over and over, until I got it right. "A good knot is a thing you can trust," he'd said. It was one of the only full sentences I ever remembered him saying directly to me. After my parents died, I asked about it. The first social worker, a tired-looking woman named Sarah, told me he wasn't able to take me. "He's not a suitable guardian," she'd said, and that was that. I was 8 years old. I believed her. I grew up believing he had abandoned me, that he hadn't wanted me. It was a simple, clean wound that I learned to live with. Now, this letter, this collapsed cellar, it felt like he was reaching out from beyond the grave to complicate the story I'd told myself. It was easier to believe he was just a peculiar old man who'd left me a mess to deal with. It was easier than hoping for anything more. The bus finally hissed to a stop in Northwood. It wasn't so much a town as a crossroads with a few buildings clinging to it. A gas station, a diner, a post office, and a small brick building with a wooden sign that read, "Davies and Dunn." The air here was different. It smelled of pine and damp earth, clean and sharp. The sky seemed bigger. I got off the bus, the only passenger to do so, and slung my single bag over my shoulder. The law office was right there. I still had an hour before my informal appointment. I needed to see it first. I walked into the gas station and bought a bottle of water and a local map. The man behind the counter had a kind, weathered face. "Help you find something?" he asked. "Looking for a parcel of land," I said, showing him the address from the letter. He squinted at it. "Ah, old man Vance's place. Sure. It's about 2 miles up Hemlock Road. But there ain't nothing there, son. Hasn't been for years." He tore down the old house himself a decade back, said he preferred the quiet. The letter mentioned a root cellar. The man chuckled. Yeah, I suppose there's that. Or there was. Caved in a couple years back, right after he passed. The whole hill sort of slid down on it. Be careful up there. It's wild country. I thanked him and started walking. Hemlock Road quickly turned from cracked asphalt to gravel, then to a dirt track that was little more than 2 ruts in the earth. The woods pressed in on both sides, tall pines and skeletal oaks blocking out the sun. It was silent, except for the crunch of my boots on the fallen leaves and the sound of my own breathing. It felt like I was walking off the edge of the world. After what felt like an eternity, I saw it. A rusty, half-fallen gate hanging from a single hinge. A faded wooden sign, barely legible, read, Vance. This was it. I pushed through the gate and stepped onto the property. My property, maybe. The woods were even thicker here, a tangle of undergrowth and fallen trees. I followed a barely there path deeper in, my heart pounding a nervous rhythm against my ribs. Then the trees opened up into a small, lumpy clearing, and in the center of it, there was the hole. The gas station owner hadn't been exaggerating. It wasn't just a collapsed cellar. It was a small landslide. A whole section of the gentle slope that backed the clearing had given way, burying whatever structure had been there under a mountain of dirt, rock, and tangled roots. All that was visible was a jagged maw in the earth, a dark opening fringed with splintered timbers and the edge of a stone lintel. It looked like a wound in the land, a grave. I stood at the edge, my stomach sinking. The lawyer was right. The man at the gas station was right. This was nothing. A worthless, dangerous hole on a forgotten patch of land. The $15,000 felt very real in that moment. It was a plane ticket out of this mess, a chance at a real life. All I had to do was walk back to that office, sign a paper, and this place, this legacy of disappointment, would be someone else's problem. I could feel the smart decision, the logical path, pulling at me. I took a step back, ready to turn around. And then I saw it. A flicker of light, not a reflection from the sun, but a dull metallic glint, half buried in the dirt near the edge of the collapse. It was out of place. Everything here was earth and wood and stone. This was something else. I knelt down, my knees sinking into the damp soil, and started digging at the spot with my bare hands. The dirt was cold and packed tight. My fingers were numb, but I kept going, scraping away handfuls of soil and small rocks. Slowly, a shape emerged. It was a corner. A metal corner. My breath caught in my throat. I dug faster, with a frantic energy I didn't know I possessed. It was a box, a heavy steel lockbox, the kind people use for important documents or cash. It was old, rusted, and covered in grime, but it was solid, and it was locked. A thick, sturdy padlock held it shut. This was no accident. This was placed here, hidden. My grandfather, the peculiar man, hadn't just left me a hole in the ground. He'd left me a secret. I hauled the box out of the dirt. It was heavy, maybe 30 pounds. I shook it. Something inside shifted with a muffled thud. It wasn't the rattle of coins. It was something soft, heavy. Paper. My mind raced. What was this? Why hide it here, on the edge of the collapse? Why not just give it to the lawyer? I looked from the box in my hands to the dark hole in the ground, and for the first time, I felt a spark. It wasn't hope, not yet. It was something sharper. It was purpose. I tucked the box under my arm, turned my back on the collapsed cellar, and started walking back toward town. I was going to see Mr. Davies, and I was going to need a pair of bolt cutters. The walk back to town felt different. The woods weren't menacing anymore. They were watchful. The silence wasn't empty. It was waiting. I felt my grandfather's presence, not as a ghost, but as a challenge. The weight of the lockbox was a physical connection to him, a puzzle he had laid out for me to solve. I walked into Mr. Davies' office exactly at my appointed time. The secretary, a woman with a helmet of gray hair, looked me up and down with disapproval before buzzing the inner office. Mr. Davies was exactly as his voice had sounded, dry, crisp, and dressed in a suit that was probably worth more than my $300. He didn't stand up. He just gestured to the chair opposite his massive mahogany desk. "Mr. Vance," he said, "you came. I trust your walk was enlightening." There was a smirk playing on his lips. "It was," I said, placing the lockbox on his desk with a heavy thud. The smirk vanished. He stared at the box, then at me. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice suddenly sharp. "I found it on the property, buried." He leaned forward, his professional mask cracking. He ran a finger over the rusted metal. "Arthur, you magnificent, stubborn old fool," he muttered to himself. Then he looked at me, his eyes reassessing me. "Your grandfather was my client for 30 years. He was also my friend. He was the most honest and frustrating man I've ever known. He believed the world had become too complicated, too dishonest. He believed in things you could touch, soil, wood, stone. He left me a hole in the ground," I said, my voice flat. "No," Davies said, shaking his head. "He left you a choice. He knew about Mountain Ridge. They'd been pressuring him to sell for years. He hated them. He hated everything they stood for, tearing down the old to put up cheap, disposable new. He couldn't leave you cash. The state would have taken it to reimburse them for your care. He couldn't leave you a house. They'd have forced a sale to pay for its upkeep. So he left you this. He left you a piece of himself." He opened a desk drawer and pulled out a key. Not a modern key, but an old iron one. He held it up. "He gave this to me the last time I saw him. He said, if the boy shows up, and if he's got the sense to look before he leaps, he might have need of this. If he just calls to take the money, throw it in the river." He reached across the desk and handed me the key. It was heavy, cold. It didn't fit the padlock on the box. "What's this for?" I asked. "I don't know," Davies admitted. "That's the other thing about Arthur. He never gave you the whole map, just the next step." He pushed a form across the desk. "This is the deed transfer, and this," he said, pointing to another paper, "is the acceptance of the offer from Mountain Ridge. $50,000, minus fees. The smart money is right there, son. Sign that one, and you can be on a bus back to civilization by nightfall with more money than you've ever had." I looked at the two papers. One was an ending, the other was a beginning. I thought about the cold of Elmwood, the years of being a file in a cabinet, a problem to be managed. I thought about my grandfather's hands, teaching me to tie a knot I could trust. I pulled my worn wallet from my pocket, took out the $10 bill I'd saved, and laid it on the desk. "I need 91 cents in change," I said. "I'm claiming my land." Mr. Davies stared at the $10 bill for a long moment. Then, for the first time, he smiled. A real smile. He reached into his own pocket, pulled out $1, and put it on the desk next to my 10. "The filing fee is on me," he said. "Welcome home, Mr. Vance." He stamped the deed transfer with a heavy, satisfying thud and slid it over to me. It was official. I was the proud owner of 1.7 acres of woods and a hole in the ground. Now there was just the matter of the box. Davies directed me to the town's hardware store. The man behind the counter was the same one from the gas station map. His name was Al. He had eyes that had seen a lot of winters. "Back again," he said, nodding. "Decide to take a look after all?" "I did," I said. "I need to buy a pair of bolt cutters." He raised an eyebrow. "Big lock?" "Big enough." I put the box on the counter. He whistled softly. "That looks like one of Arthur's." He looked me over again, a new understanding in his eyes. "You're his grandson, aren't you? You got his chin." He sold me the bolt cutters and a heavy-duty flashlight. "You're gonna need this, too," he said, adding a worn leather work belt with a hammer loop and a few pouches. "Put it on his account." "His account?" "Arthur's. He had a line of credit here. Never used it much, but he always paid the annual fee to keep it open. Said it was for a rainy day." Al's gaze was steady. "Looks like it's raining." I walked out of that store feeling like the ground had shifted beneath my feet. A lawyer who was a friend. A store owner who remembered my grandfather and was willing to help me. In one afternoon, I'd found more community in this tiny, forgotten town than I had in a decade at Elmwood. I walked the 2 miles back to my land, the deed in my pocket, the bolt cutters heavy in my hand. I sat on a fallen log in the clearing, the lockbox in front of me. The sun was beginning to set, casting long, golden fingers of light through the trees. The air was getting cold again, but it was a different kind of cold. This was a wild cold, a natural cold. It didn't feel like it was trying to erase me. I took a deep breath, positioned the jaws of the bolt cutters around the thick shackle of the padlock, and squeezed. The metal groaned in protest, then snapped with a loud crack that echoed through the quiet woods. The lock fell away. My hands were shaking as I lifted the heavy lid. The inside of the box was lined with oilcloth to keep out the damp, and nestled inside was a thick, leather-bound journal, a stack of envelopes tied with twine, and a small velvet pouch. I opened the pouch first. Inside was the key to the padlock I had just cut. A classic Arthur Vance move, a test of initiative. He didn't want me to wait for a key. He wanted me to find my own way in. I picked up the journal. His handwriting filled the pages, strong and clear. It wasn't a diary. It was a manual. It was a complete, detailed plan for the root cellar. Not as it was, but as it was meant to be. He had designed it himself. The collapse, it turned out, was deliberate. The last entry in the journal explained it. "The mountain ridge vultures are circling," he wrote. "They see land. I see a legacy. They can't want what they can't see. A controlled collapse is the only way to hide it, to protect it until Leo is old enough. It will look like an accident, a tragedy. But a foundation of stone is a patient thing. It can wait. My foundation of stone. He had built it for me. And then he had buried it for me." I put the journal down and picked up the stack of letters. The one on top just had my name on it. Leo. I untied the twine, my fingers fumbling. The paper was thick and soft with age. I unfolded it and began to read. "My dear Leo," it began. "If you are reading this, it means you did not take the easy money. It means you have some of my own stubborn blood in you. Good. You will need it. I am sorry for the years of silence. They told me I was not fit to raise you, a broken old man in a half-finished house in the woods. Maybe they were right. But I never stopped thinking of you. I never stopped trying to find a way to give you a foundation. The letter went on to explain everything. He had spent the last 10 years of his life not just building the cellar, but planning for this moment. He knew the system would chew me up and spit me out with nothing. He knew any money he left would be seized. So he left me something they couldn't take, something they couldn't even value. He left me work. He left me a home that I would have to earn, that I would have to build myself. The cellar is more than it seems, he wrote. The collapse only covered the entrance. The main chamber is intact. The stone is sound. You have a roof over your head. You just have to dig it out. Everything you need to begin is here, in this town. People who remember what a man's word is worth. Tools you can get on credit. The knowledge is in the journal. The strength is in your back. The will, well, that has to be in your heart. I read the last lines through a blur of tears. This land is not an inheritance, son. It's a challenge. The world will tell you to sell it, to take the quick and easy path. I am asking you to choose the hard one. I am asking you to build something. Not for me, for you. Prove them all wrong. Prove that a Vance can build something that lasts. Your home is here, Leo, if you're brave enough to claim it. I sat there in the fading light, the letter in my hand, and I cried. I cried for the 8-year-old boy who thought his grandfather didn't want him. I cried for the 10 years I'd spent believing I was alone. I cried for this stubborn, magnificent old man who had spent his last years building a secret kingdom for a boy he wasn't allowed to see. They weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of grief, of anger, and of a profound, earth-shaking gratitude. He hadn't abandoned me. He had been protecting me in the only way he knew how. The weight of this revelation was immense. It was a gift, but it was also a burden. Could I do it? Could I, a boy who'd never built anything, who'd only ever learned how to be invisible, really do this? The doubt was a cold snake in my gut. The idea of digging out tons of earth and rock, of rebuilding a structure from a blueprint in a journal, it was insane. The smart thing, the sane thing, was still to go back to Davies, tell him I'd made a mistake, and sign the paper. And you know, if you've made it this far into my story, maybe you've faced a moment like this. A moment where the safe path is right there, lit up and easy, and the meaningful path is dark, steep, and full of obstacles. It's a terrifying place to be. If this is hitting you in a real way, I want you to just take a second. Acknowledge that feeling. That's the feeling of a real choice. Let me know in the comments if you've ever had to choose the hard path, and what gave you the strength to do it. Because hearing those stories, that's what this community is all about. I spent my first night as a landowner sleeping in the woods, wrapped in my thin jacket, with my grandfather's journal as a pillow. It was the best I'd slept in years. The next morning, I woke up with the sun, my body stiff and cold, but my mind clear. I had a purpose. I walked back to town, to Al's hardware store. He was there, sweeping the front stoop. "Morning, son," he said. "Sleep all right?" "Well enough," I said. "I need to open an account." He smiled. "Already did. Arthur's account is your account now. What do you need?" "A shovel, a good one, and a wheelbarrow, and gloves." I spent the next week doing nothing but digging. It was brutal, back-breaking work. I was moving the collapsed earth away from the entrance. Every morning, I'd walk into town, have a cheap breakfast at the diner where a waitress named Chloe started saving me a corner booth, then head to my land. I'd dig until my muscles screamed, until my hands were raw, until the sun went down. I'd haul bucket after bucket, then wheelbarrow after wheelbarrow of dirt and rock and tangled roots, dumping it on the far side of the clearing. I was a machine fueled by stale donuts and a decade of pent-up anger. Slowly, agonizingly, the structure began to reveal itself. First, the top of the massive stone lintel over the doorway, then the heavy oak door, miraculously intact, though half buried, and finally the stone walls on either side, built from huge, expertly fitted field stones. My grandfather had been a master stonemason. The walls were flawless, unbowed by the tons of earth that had pressed against them. The collapse had been, just as he'd written, a blanket, not a hammer. After a week of solid digging, I had cleared the entrance. The door was free. I stood before it, my heart pounding. The old iron key Mr. Davies had given me felt heavy in my palm. It slid into the huge, ancient lock. With a groan of protest from the rusty metal, the lock turned. I put my shoulder to the heavy door and pushed. It swung inward into perfect, absolute darkness. I clicked on the flashlight Al had sold me. The beam cut through the black, illuminating a set of stone steps leading down. The air that wafted out was cool and dry, smelling of earth and stone and time. It didn't smell of rot or decay. My grandfather had designed it with a clever ventilation system, hidden pipes that kept the air circulating even when it was buried. I took a breath and walked down the steps, out of the world of sun and trees and into the earth. The main chamber was magnificent. It was about 20 feet by 30 feet, with a high, arched ceiling of fitted stone. It was completely empty, a blank canvas of rock. The floor was packed earth, but it was level and dry. In one corner, there was a small, bricked-up fireplace with a flue leading up to one of the hidden vents. This wasn't a root cellar. This was a fortress, a sanctuary, my home. I spent the next month working inside. I used the money I had left to buy bags of concrete mix from Al. I spent a week mixing it by hand in the wheelbarrow and pouring a smooth, level concrete floor. The labor was immense, but every ache in my back, every blister on my hands, felt like a victory. I was paying for my home, not with money, but with sweat. I was earning it. Just as I was finishing the floor, I got a call. It was Mr. Davies. "Leo," he said, his voice urgent. "Mountain Ridge knows you've claimed the property. They're not happy. They've authorized me to increase their offer. $75,000, no fees, straight to you." I was standing in my stone room, covered in concrete dust, exhausted and sore. $75,000. It was a fortune. I could hire a contractor to finish this place. I could buy a car. I could leave this town and never work this hard again. "Tell them no," I said, without a second of hesitation. "Leo, listen to me," Davies urged. "These are not nice people. They're used to getting their way. They've started making inquiries with the county about zoning violations, about permits. They're going to try and force you out." "Let them try," I said. "This place is mine. My grandfather gave it to me." "He gave you a pile of rocks?" Davies said, his frustration boiling over. "Take the money, son. It's the smart play." "It's not about the money," I said softly, looking at the stone walls my grandfather had built. "It never was." I hung up. The threat from Mountain Ridge didn't scare me. It fueled me. This wasn't just about building a home anymore. It was about defending it. My grandfather's journal was my Bible. It had sketches, measurements, notes on everything. He had planned for more than just the main room. One entry read, The west wall is the key. The stone is good, but it's a false wall. Your future is on the other side. I went to the west wall. It looked as solid as the others, but I tapped it with my hammer, listening, and there it was, a section near the bottom that sounded different, hollow. I took a sledgehammer and a chisel from Al's store, on credit of course, and started to work. It took 2 days of relentless pounding, but finally a stone loosened. I pulled it out. Then another. Behind them was not dirt, but empty space. I cleared a hole big enough to shine my flashlight through. It was another room, smaller than the first, about 10 by 15 feet. It was rougher, only partially excavated. My grandfather had started the expansion, but he hadn't had time to finish it. This became my next project. I spent the next 2 months digging out that second room, using the excavated dirt and rock to build up a retaining wall outside, further securing the hillside. I poured another concrete floor. I ran rudimentary wiring, powered by a small generator Al helped me pick out. I had a bedroom. It wasn't much, just a concrete box with a cot in it, but it was mine. I had built it. The journal mentioned one more secret. Every good house has a heart. Find the heartstone. A sketch showed the fireplace in the main room, with an X marked on one of the stones in the chimney breast. I had looked at it 100 times and seen nothing. But now, with the light of my new wiring, I saw it. A single stone was a slightly different color, a darker gray. It had no mortar around it. It was just perfectly tightly fitted. I got a crowbar and gently worked it into the seam. The stone slid out with surprising ease, and behind it, in a small brick-lined cavity, was another box. This one was smaller, made of steel, but it was heavy. Unlocked. My hands trembled as I lifted it out and opened the lid. It was full of money, stacks of $100 bills wrapped in paper bands. I sat on the floor and counted it. It took me almost an hour. There was over $100,000. Tucked in the bottom was one last letter on a single sheet of paper. Leo, it said. This is everything. Everything I sold. The old house, my truck, my tools, my savings. I couldn't trust the banks. I couldn't trust the government. I could only trust stone and earth. And I could only trust you. This money is your freedom. But freedom isn't about being able to run away. It's about being able to stay. It's about being able to build. Don't just use this to make your own life comfortable. Use it to put down roots so deep no storm can ever pull them up. Your grandmother always said, the best thing you can plant is a community. Don't forget that. Be better than me. Don't just build walls, build bridges. I sat there on the concrete floor I had poured, in the room I had reclaimed from the earth, and held a fortune in my hands. The irony was crushing. All this time, I had been living like a pauper, working until I dropped, all while a treasure was hidden just a few feet away. But as I looked around the room, at the solid walls, at the smooth floor, at the work of my own hands, I realized my grandfather had given me 2 gifts. The money was the lesser of them. The real gift was the work, the struggle. He had forced me to build a home before he let me find the money to furnish it. He had forced me to build character before he gave me capital. The next day I walked into Mr. Davies' office. He looked tired. Leo, he said, Mountain Ridge just filed a formal complaint with the county. They're trying to get your land condemned as unsafe. I don't know if we can fight it. I put the steel box on his desk. He looked inside, and his jaw dropped. Good Lord, Arthur, he whispered. He actually did it. I want to hire you, I said. Not as the executor of the estate, but as my lawyer. I want you to fight them, and I want you to do something else for me. I want you to find out who owns the parcel of land directly to the west of mine. It turned out the adjacent property was a small, struggling farm owned by an elderly couple, the Millers. Mountain Ridge had been trying to buy them out too, offering them a lowball price that would barely cover their debts. They were the last holdouts on the hill. My land was the final piece of the puzzle Mountain Ridge needed to acquire the whole ridge for a massive luxury cabin development. I knew what I had to do. My grandfather's last words echoed in my head. Build bridges. I walked over to the Miller farm. It was a beautiful place, with a sagging barn and a tidy little farmhouse, but you could see the years of struggle everywhere. I found Mr. Miller out by his fence, mending a broken post. He was a stooped old man with kind eyes, and he looked at me with suspicion. He knew who I was, the kid who was squatting in the old Vance hole. I introduced myself. I'm Leo Vance, Arthur's grandson. He just nodded, his expression unreadable. I hear Mountain Ridge has been giving you a hard time, I said. They've been giving everyone a hard time for 5 years, he said, his voice weary. They'll win in the end. They always do. Maybe not this time, I said. I took a deep breath. I'd like to make you an offer, not for your land, for your partnership. I have the capital to fight Mountain Ridge, and I have the capital to restore this farm. I want to invest in this place, in you. We can form a new company, a trust. We can put both our properties in it, and the developer can't touch either one. We can fix this barn. We can plant new crops. We can build something that lasts. He stared at me, his mouth slightly open. He looked at my hands, calloused and dirty from 100 days of labor. He looked into my eyes, and I think he saw the truth there. I wasn't some kid with a pile of money. I was Arthur Vance's grandson. I was a builder. He stuck out his hand. The name's George, he said, and I think you and I have a lot to talk about. That was the beginning, the real beginning. We fought Mountain Ridge, and with Davy's help and a war chest they never saw coming, we won. We used the rest of the money to bring the Miller farm back to life. I never stopped working on my bunker. I eventually excavated a 3rd room, turning it into a workshop, just like my grandfather's. I ran proper plumbing and electricity. It was a comfortable, solid 3-room home, built into the heart of the earth. But it was more than that. It was an anchor. I live there still. I spend my days working the farm with George, and my evenings in the quiet stone silence of my underground home. I've come to love the feeling of the earth around me. It's not confining, it's protective. It's a constant reminder that the strongest foundations are the ones that are hidden from view. My grandfather left me a collapsed root cellar and $100,000. But that wasn't the real inheritance. The real inheritance was the lesson that home is not a place you are given, it is a place you build. That wealth is not money in a box, but skill in your hands and a community at your back. He buried a treasure, but he made me dig for it. And in the digging, I found myself. So if you're out there, feeling like you're starting from nothing, remember this. The most valuable things are often buried under a pile of rubble. Sometimes you have to dig. You have to do the hard work. But what you build will be yours in a way that nothing given to you ever can be. This channel is for the diggers. It's for the people who build a new life from the ruins of the old one. If that's you, I hope you'll subscribe and join us. And in the comments below, I want you to tell me one thing. What have you built that you're proud of? It doesn't have to be a house. It can be a relationship, a skill, a second chance. I'll be reading every single one. because your story matters. We all have a foundation of stone inside us. We just have to be brave enough to start digging.